Hello, Emma and the graphic design students. Welcome to Adobe After Effects. We're going to do a little tutorial on making some very basic motion graphics, and maybe doing a little bit of tracking as well. So I'm just going to close this window. So this is the basic interface here for Adobe After Effects. So down the bottom of the screen here where my mouse is moving, this is the timeline. We have nothing on that at the moment. This large area here is the composition window where we'll manipulate all of our assets. Over here on the left we have basically like a version of Windows Explorer. This is sort of a list of all the assets that'll be in our project. And over on this side we've got like an inspector where we can see the characteristics or properties of items that we're exploring. And down here we've got some more advanced features that we might look at a bit later, so like tracking. So we're going to start a new composition. So first of all, obviously we need to have a think about what we're trying to create. Obviously a piece of video if we're in Adobe After Effects, and we should always have our eye on our export and what we're going to export. What's the purpose of the video, and therefore what resolution and color space are we working in. So just for now we're going to keep it simple and work in 8-bit color, and we're going to work in HD. So I'm going to hit new composition, and Adobe After Effects requires you to understand what the settings of your own project are. There are some presets, we can pull them down here, but they themselves need quite a bit of understanding if you don't know what all of these things mean. So let's just look at the basics. So we want our video to be HD, so which is 1920 by 1080, and we want our pixels to be square. So this is very important. And then the frame rate is 25. So you may decide not to use 25 frames per second. If you want to upload to, say, YouTube, it'll probably convert it to 30 frames a second. Or depending on what sort of video or components you're using in your project. But 1920 by 1080 at 25 frames is fairly standard. I can actually shift that up to 30 because I know the video that I'm going to import later has 30 frames a second. And then finally we get to select the duration of the timeline that we're going to use. So I have mine set to be 10 seconds. I think by default it's 30. So we'll leave it at 10 seconds for now. You can change this later in during the project if you want, but it's good to get it sort of set at the beginning. So we'll call this, we'll give it a name, we'll call it MG for motion graphics and class 1, and hit OK. So we're now in After Effects. What we're looking at here, this black square or black rectangle, is our composition. So anything that we're going to build on or create is going to go in here, and anything we want to import, images, etc., will go in here. So let's just import an asset for now so we can see a piece of video, for example, in our composition. So I'm going to right click and go import file, and on my desktop I have this piece of footage here, so I'm going to hit import, and it's I'm going to double click on it now, and it's going to load it into this window. So this is a piece of sort of aerial photography of Bray Head. So I'm going to scrub through my video here and then sort of find the piece of the video that I want. So maybe we'll start about there. I'm going to mark in, so that's the point at which I want it to start, and I can press the space bar and let it play, and the drone is sort of stopped at that point and off she goes. So maybe we'll start the video a little bit earlier and we'll mark in there instead and press spacebar, and that's just the drone slowly sort of crawling forwards, and we hit 35 here. That's approximately 10 seconds. So I'm going to mark out, and then to get this into my composition I can press one of these two buttons here. So for now I'm just going to hit overlay. So just to point out to you, in this window that we can be looking at multiple things. So we're no longer looking at the original piece of video, which is, I believe, Does it give me a duration? It doesn't. But let's say hypothetically it's 50 seconds long. What we're actually looking at now is the 10 seconds we've cut out of it. So this is the composition, and this here is the original video. So you can end up, if you're using quite a few assets, you can end up with numerous pieces of media kind of strung across here at the top of your composition window, and sometimes it's easy to lose track of what you're actually looking at. So we're now looking at the composition MG class 1, and this is the 10 seconds that we've cut out. If you end up with too many items here, you can literally just close the panel, and then we can go back to our original composition. So we're just going to leave that in the background for a little bit. We can turn it on and off so it's visible or not visible, just using the little eye icon here like you would in Photoshop. And we're going to end up with multiple layers here. So we're going to work on some layers and make a little basic animation. So let's start by going to our pen tool here, and we'll have a look at some of the options available to us with the pen tool. So I can draw a set of lines here, so I can draw a shape, and then I can complete the shape, and you can see that it has used that shape as a mask. Now where is that shape? Well, that shape has been added to this original piece of video, and it's in it's called masks. So I can literally press the delete key now, and I've deleted that mask. Now if I want to make a shape that goes on top of this that has nothing to do with the video, I can right click and go new solid. Excuse me. And it's asking me to give the name, so I was going to leave it with this name it's given it here, and it's got the same size and pixel aspect ratio as before, so I'm going to hit OK. So now I've added a solid color to my composition. So now if I want to draw on this, I can make a shape that is that solid color, and then I can click on my move tool, and I can move the individual, the lines around. I can select individual verts that are in the mask, and I can make a shape. If I wanted to animate that shape, I could simply go to my mask and keeping in mind that this has a timeline, so I'm on frame 1. I want to open up the masks, and it says mask path, which is basically its shape, and I'm going to turn on this little clock, and that basically enables keyframes. So a little diamond has been added here in the on the timeline to indicate that this shape here has been remembered. And if I move forward, say 2 seconds, and now because I have this enabled, if I move anything, so I'll just move one. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So we'll just move one of these. Okay, that's not what I wanted. So I'm going to pick mask feather. There we go. So you can see that it has both animated the shape and the position. So we can zoom in here, and look, I've added in 2 keyframes by mistake. Okay, so let's just delete that mask, and let's have a plan. Let's plan a little sort of logo. So let's add a piece of text. So I'm going to right click and go new text, and you can see I've got a cursor here, so I can just type. So I'm going to type in BIFE. So there's my piece of text. So I'm going to select it like you would if you were using word processor. I can go over here, change my color. So the Biffy colors are sort of purple. And I can go over and pick a non-generic font. And I haven't got quite a lot of fonts available to me here. Yeah, and then we, as you would in most word processors, there's a whole bunch of options open to us here in terms of you know, kernings and all sorts of you know, we have loads of options in terms of what you'd see in a word processor. Is it centered? Is it the font size, etc. So I'm not going to dwell on these too much. These are kind of just basic sort of attributes. I'm going to click back here on move, and then I can reposition this anywhere I want. So I'm just going to place this here. Now, so what I want is I want the text to appear, to fade in. So this is my text here, and I've got my transform options, of path options and more options here. But under transform, I have its position, so I can change its position and its scale and its rotation. But I also have its opacity. So again, to animate its opacity, I just turn on this little clock, and I'll say move in 2 seconds, and then I can change the value. Now I've changed it back to what it originally was. I went from 100 to 100, so now, so nothing has changed, not terribly interesting. But now on this first keyframe here, I'm going to reduce it to 0, and now it's invisible. So now it's going to fade in over a 2 second period. So keyframing is quite straightforward and quite simple. Now, what else do I want? I would like some whirly-twirlies, so try and make some nice shapes and animate some lines and some graphics that move, some motion graphics. So I can, if I want, I can try and I can go draw an ellipse here or a circle, and it's automatically added in a mask onto the text. So I don't want that. So I'm going to close up this text layer. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go new shape layer. Now I just want to point out to you that this shape layer is on top, and just like in Photoshop or in Illustrator, these are layers, and if I place this video layer on the top, I will no longer see my text because the text is now underneath the video layer, and if I take the text and put it on top, I can see it, and my shape layer is now, whatever I put on this will be topmost, so it'll go on top of the text or whatever's underneath. So the order of the layers is important. You can't drag them here, you have to drag them by their names over here. So in this shape layer, I have my ellipse tool here selected, so let's draw a shape. Now after I've clicked on it here, I can look up here and go, do I want it to have a fill? So I don't want any fill. And then I can look at the stroke, and sorry, that's where I was. So I can look at the fill, and then yeah, so I can look at how thick it is and the color. So again, we can just use the pipette here and pick my Biffy color to be consistent, and I can hit OK. So I've made a little a circle or a shape, and let's rename this layer. So I'm just going to click rename, right click on it and go rename, and we'll call this circle. Circle 1, because I'm horribly original. Now it's going to move it into position, and then I'm going to animate it a little bit. So first of all, I'm going to repeat my fade. So I'm going to animate its opacity and set it to an opacity of 0. And then after about 2 seconds, I'm going to fade it up to 100%. But I'm also going to peel myself back here and set its scale, and the scale is currently locked, so the horizontal and vertical axes are locked. I'll set it to say 20%, so it's nice and small. So there's my circle there. We'll stop there. So there's my circle. So let's just zoom in. We can see it's nice and small. Now I don't like its position, so let's reposition it here. Now we haven't turned on any of the keyframes for scale or position, so these are not being recorded, these changes. So now it should just fade in that position. So we will keyframe its scale, and then as we so I'm just going to zoom out now on my I'm going to go all the way to 10 seconds. I'm going to scale this out. Now, as we can see, what's happening is it's scaling around this pivot point. So, or its anchor point. So if I change the anchor point, then when I change the scale, it should scale around that point. And then we'll change its position just a little bit. Now, and then we can and maybe actually we'll get it to scale right out. We'll just leave it there at the end. Ooh, maybe even a bit bigger. Okay. So, and I'm just going to press spacebar for play, and off she goes. Now, so that's our first little animation, and let's take our circle here and let's duplicate it. So, so the easiest way to do that is just to select it and go Control C, Control V, and it has very handily renamed it Circle 2. So Circle 2 now has all of the same characteristics as Circle 1 and is sitting on top of it. So let's just change the out point here of this, or the positioning of the keyframes. So they're kind of emerging from the same point, and then with this one here, we want it to keep going. So we'll just scale it off screen there, and then we can no longer see it. Okay. So, so that's interesting and good. So let's just go to say the 1 second here so we can see everything. So let's add in another shape layer, and we'll call this pointer. Now, with this, I'm going to go back to my pen tool, and I'm going to draw from there to there to there. Now I'm going to turn off Roto Bezier. In fact, I should have done that before I drew it. So let's just delete that and do it again. Okay. So we right click and go New Shape Layer, and we'll call it Pointer. And I'm going to click on this here, and that's Roto Bezier is turned off. Okay, so I'm going to click from there to there to there. Now the difference between, if I turn on Roto Bezier, it'll curve it, so it'll try to approximate a curve. as opposed to giving me exactly straight lines. And I can change the width of the line. Let's not do that, but I may change the color of it. So let's see if we can find a nice complementary color. So let's take something like that. Now, it's a bit bland, but it kind of blends horribly in with the background. So this here is so it's an interesting addition. So we've got this extra line. So let's see if we can animate that line and what we might do to do that. So so there's many. So let's just have a look at some of the menu options here. So After Effects is an extraordinarily versatile piece of software, and there's lots and lots of things that we can do in it. So if I select the pointer here and I right click, let's have a brief look at some of the options that we have. So I can go to Effects, and there are an immense number of effects that I can put on. These are normally used for sort of rasterized images or video. So putting it so you can do color keying for green screening. You can distort things, liquefy, magnify, etc. You can do tracking, which we'll get onto in a little while. But there are also a whole bunch of other options here. So I've got masks and paths. I've got all of my transform options that are also available to me down in the timeline window. I've got frame blending, which we might get to another day, and I can reverse a piece of video or time stretch it. I've got the same sort of blending modes that you would identify in Photoshop, so how layers are blended together. And I've got a whole bunch of options here for the edge style of my layers. So I can pick. So I've got a glow, and we can do all sorts of lovely things with this. And actually, let's not play with it too much. Let's go back. Let's stay on point. So what I'm interested in looking at now is I want to add in some of the. There are a number of options available to us in terms of what we can do to this layer here. In terms of what to animate this line. So I'm just going to go to this little button here. It says Add, and this is going to add in for us the ability to animate the line. So what I'm interested in is this one here, Trim Paths. And when I add that in, I have this. I have my shape here, and then I have this new folder that's opened, or a new set of options. So I'm just going to move my timeline to the beginning and so show you kind of what this does. So as I move this here, this is the percentage of the start and end that I can see. So if I start this, I'm just going to type in a number, say 15%. So 15% of this line is now visible. So from 0 to 15%. And I can keyframe both of those values. And then by the end, I can say 100% is visible. And show you how that would animate. So this is moving down the line here. And then I can increase this to say 85%. And then it looks like I've got a little moving tab. Okay, so I'm actually not going to use that option here. I'm going to set this for the out frame. I'm going to set it back to 0 so that we have the full full piece. Now, and I may change the color of that because it's hard to see. And yeah, so that's sort of just to kind of show you a couple of techniques, a couple of kind of basic transforms and basic sort of animations. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to delete the background video, and we're just going to look at this in isolation. Okay, so this is our video, or our little logo. So I'm going to delete this pointer layer and add in something a little bit more interesting. So let's have so let's go new shape layer, and we'll rename this shape layer. We'll call it underline, and we will zoom in a bit, and we'll just draw a line from there to there, and we will recolor that. And actually, let's just stay with our color. Okay, and yeah, make it a wee bit thicker. Okay, so, and then we will go through the same technique that we had there. So we're going to go add trim paths. We'll go back to the beginning. We'll worry about its opacity in a moment. We'll keyframe these values here, but change this to say 15. And then by the end of the piece, or the end of this little animation, we'll extend that to 100. So we've sort of filled our line. Okay, and then we'll also, under the transform, we will keyframe its opacity and set it to 0, so it fades in with everything else. So about there, and give it a full opacity. So in we go, and the line goes under, and then we'll duplicate this. So again, we'll go Control C, Control V, and very simply in this one, we'll just use the transform tool to move that to there, and we'll this one a little bit thinner, and we will Control C, Control V, and again we'll use the transform tool to reposition this underneath, and then make this one a wee bit thinner. Okay, so off we go. Now, and then we'll do one more. We'll put back in sort of our what was our pointer. So we'll go new shape layer, and we'll call it pointer. And we'll add in a let's just give ourselves a reference point. We'll add in a line. I didn't mean to do that, from there to there. So it's going to change. So I'm using Bezier handles, but I want it to be straight. So well, it doesn't matter if it's straight, I suppose. Okay, and again we'll add in our trim paths, and we will kind of ignore the rest of this, and we'll start this at, say, we'll put this at, I don't know, 35%. So we'll start it already existing a decent amount, and at the end set it to be 100. Okay. Now, with this one, I just want to kind of... actually, no, I can leave it the way it is there. It's fine. And we'll reposition this. Okay. So, now what we're going to do is have a look at something, kind of the one of the more sort of powerful and interesting parts of After Effects, now that we've made a little animation. Why didn't that... because I didn't keyframe it, that's why. And... okay, and then back here. Yeah, I'll just leave it like that. Okay. So we're going to look at one of the more kind of interesting parts of this. So right now we are in our composition that we made. So we're going to make a new composition. And this new composition, I'm going to call this video BG, video background. And it's got the same 10 seconds, 30 frames a second, 9020, 1080, same as before. So this is a new composition, and in this composition I'm going to put my video in. And in here I'm going to create a new null object. And a null object is like is nothing, is an empty, is a placeholder. So it has no characteristics per se. It does have actually a position and other characteristics, but it's not doing anything. And all we're going to use it for is holding data. So with my video selected, so not the null object that we've created, with the video selected, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to look for, this is the Biffy campus here. And what I want to do is I want to do some tracking. So I'm going to go track to camera tracker, or I can do track motion. So I'm going to track the motion of that object, which is the Biffy campus. So it's giving me a tracking point here. Now, I could do a more complex tracking point where I'm tracking rotation and scale, but I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. And I'm going to pick... I don't know what part of the campus I'm looking at here, so the car park, so that stay there. So I'm right at the beginning of the composition. Over here is my tracking information. I just literally picked that up and placed it on the point I wanted to track. And I'm going to press play. Now this play marker over here has its own sort of characteristics, in the sense that it is a tracker. It's playing forward and it's analyzing every frame. So we're going to just zoom in here and have a look at this tracker and see if it's working. So if this little square here is consistently in the same place. Now you can see it pixelating. Now we can turn on all sorts of quality here, like so I can click on this, on this one here, and change the quality of the preview. But that track looks pretty good. It looks like a fairly solid track. Now, so I'm going to hit edit target, and I'm going to tell it that the target is null 1. So that's where we want to put the information. I'm going to go OK. And then I'm going to hit apply. And apply dimensions X and Y. OK. So that's done. So we can do that. So that's great. So we have applied tracking information to an empty object. Very good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go, this is our original composition, and this is our video composition. One second. So I'm going to take the original video, or the little logo, and I'm going to drag and drop it into this new composition. Now I can't see it because it's underneath, so I was going to drag it up on top here. So that's it there. Now when I change some of the attributes of this, I'm changing every object. So I can, let's just forward in here. I'm just going to change the scale of it, but I'm changing everything. And I can reposition it, so I can basically put this here on the the tip of this on sort of the Biffy campus here. And then I can tell this object here, doesn't matter if it's a layer or a composition, what its parent should be. So I want its parent to be the null object. So, and the null object has information about Biffy. So as we move forward here, let me just turn off that there. So as we move forward, and we have a little skip there, that's it, so I probably have to go in and fix that tracking point. But you can see that the logo, even though we're moving forward through the video, that this little animation is locked to this position here because it's following the tracking information that we put on the null point. So I think I'm going to stop there. So we can do lots and lots and lots of things in After Effects. We can, if we wanted to, we could go add a virtual camera now and make things three-dimensional so we can fly past them, or you know, there's an awful lot we can do. But for a first session, I think that's probably enough.